My name isn't really important. What matters is what happened to me. If you're listening to this, know one thing. I never thought my own daughter would be the one to hand me the cup that almost killed me. It started on a Thursday. I was in my home office going through quarterly reports, the kind of paperwork that's both mindless and necessary. That's when Derek showed up, my son-in-law. He didn't knock. He never did. Amanda, my daughter, was right behind him, her face tense like she already knew what this was about. Derek had that slick salesman energy, the smell of cologne, the fake confidence. He dropped a folder on my desk and started talking fast. This is it, Frank. Ground floor opportunity. 45,000 gets us in, and we're looking at 30% returns in 6 months. Minimum. I closed the folder and pushed it back toward him. Derek, I've heard these promises before. The answer's no. He didn't move. He just leaned against my desk, invading my space, smiling like I'd eventually cave. We take care of this house, we help you out. Feels like we're already partners, right? That line hit me wrong. This house, I built it 30 years ago. Every beam, every nail. Hearing him call it ours was like a stranger laying claim to my blood. Amanda finally snapped. Her hand hit the desk hard enough to rattle the lamp. You've always been like this, Dad. Counting every penny. We're your family, not a charity case. I looked at her, my daughter, and for a second I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. You lived here rent-free for 2 years, I said quietly. I gave you 30,000 last year. And it vanished. Where did it go? She looked away. You don't understand the pressure we're under. I understand perfectly. But I didn't say the rest. That Derek had hollowed her out, reshaped her into someone desperate and angry. They stormed out together. Derek glanced back once, the kind of look predators give before deciding whether you're worth the effort. That night, the house felt colder. I walked through the rooms touching old memories, Patricia's photo on the mantel, the banister I'd sanded by hand. Every object reminded me what I'd built, and what I was about to lose. Sleep didn't come easy. Morning came gray and quiet. Amanda knocked softly. Dad, can I come in? Her eyes were red like she'd been crying, or wanted me to think she had. I said terrible things, she whispered. I didn't mean them. Derek's been stressed, and I just took it out on you. She held a cup. Steam curled from it. Made your favorite coffee. 2 sugars, splash of cream. Peace offering. Smelled right. Familiar. But something in her smile didn't reach her eyes. I hesitated, then took it. There's nothing to forgive, I said. I lied. She smiled, small, strained. I sipped. The taste was fine. Maybe a little bitter. She watched the clock. I noticed that. 5 minutes later, my stomach twisted. The world tilted. The newspaper in my hands blurred. I tried to stand, but my legs turned to water. The phone on the table might as well have been a mile away. I crawled. My fingers were heavy, clumsy. Managed to dial 911. Emergency services, what's your? My tongue was thick. I've been poisoned. Need help. Sir, your address? 4217 Birchwood Drive. The phone slipped from my hand. The last thing I saw before the world went black was the kitchen ceiling spinning above me, and the coffee cup lying on its side, a brown stain spreading like blood. I woke to the sound of beeping. White lights. The smell of disinfectant. A nurse leaned over me, smiling gently. Mr. Ellen, can you hear me? You're in St. David's Medical Center. You were brought in by ambulance. My throat felt raw. What happened? You were poisoned, she said softly. Doctor will explain. Time stretched. Bender. Mitchell came in mid-40s, calm, serious eyes. He held a tablet with my chart. Mr. Allen, he said, your blood work shows extremely high levels of benzodiazepines and diphenhydramine. Those don't mix accidentally. He let that sink in. Someone put them in something you drank. My hand tightened on the blanket. The cup. Amanda's eyes watching the clock. No, I whispered. You're wrong. I wish I were, he said. We've notified authorities, but I need to ask, do you know who could have done this? I couldn't answer. How do you tell a stranger your own child might have tried to kill you? Family? He asked quietly. I didn't nod. I didn't have to. He sighed. I'll give you 24 hours before I file the mandatory report. Think it through. He stood. You're lucky you called 911. Another 15 minutes and we'd be having a very different conversation. He left me staring at the ceiling tiles, the fluorescent light humming like an accusation. My daughter had handed me that cup. And I drank it. Later that afternoon, Amanda burst into the hospital room, crying, shaking, the perfect picture of a concerned daughter. Dad, I came as soon as I heard. Are you okay? I let my voice stay weak, confused. Just tired. What happened? You collapsed, she said quickly. I called 911. I thought I'd lose you. Derek stood behind her, silent, watching. Did the doctors say what caused it? He asked. They're still figuring it out, I said. When I mentioned the word drank, Amanda's hand twitched. Derek's eyes flicked toward her. 2 small tells. Not much, but enough. After they left, I pulled out my phone. In my notes app, I typed, Amanda, flinch when I mention drink. Derek, watching for reaction. Both nervous. Then I locked the screen. They thought I was just an old man who'd survived by luck. They had no idea what kind of man I used to be. And what kind I was about to become. I didn't sleep much that night in the hospital. The machines beeped, nurses came and went, but my mind was somewhere else, replaying every detail of that morning. The bitterness in the coffee. Amanda's eyes. The clock. By dawn, my anger had cooled into something sharper. Not rage. Precision. When you've built a house with your own hands, you learn patience. You measure twice, cut once. And that's exactly what I planned to do with the truth. The doctor discharged me 2 days later. Amanda insisted on driving me home. Derek followed in his truck, pretending to be the caring son-in-law. I kept my performance going, frail, tired, confused. Amanda carried my bag, fluttering around me like a nervous nurse. You should rest, Dad. I'll make lunch. Thank you, I said softly. She smiled, but her hand shook when she set down the tray. She didn't look me in the eyes. I watched her leave the room, then reached for my phone. I searched. Estate Attorneys, Austin, Texas. The first name that came up was Margaret Davies and Associates. The review said she was sharp, discreet, ruthless. Exactly what I needed. Her office smelled like old leather and quiet judgment. She listened as I told her everything, the argument, the coffee, the poisoning, the hospital. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she leaned back, fingers steepled. Mr. Allen, what you're describing is attempted murder. Have you filed a report? Not yet, I said. I want justice, not chaos. I want to take back control. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You don't want revenge. No, I said. Revenge is emotional. I want consequence. She nodded once. Then you'll need documentation. A new will for starters. Do you have children other than Amanda? No. Then you're free to disinherit her completely. Texas law gives you that right. But if she contests it, we'll need proof of competence. Evidence she tried to harm you. A paper trail. I can build that, I said. She slid me a card. Brian Cole. Private investigator. Former detective. He's expensive but thorough. Brian's office looked like every detective movie cliché. Filing cabinets, coffee stains, a smell of cold tobacco. He listened, then nodded slowly. You think your daughter tried to kill you for inheritance money? I don't think, I said. I know. He scribbled notes. Financial background checks, surveillance, phone records, it's not cheap. You sure you want to go that far? I nearly died in my own kitchen, I said. You tell me how far that goes. His face softened slightly. All right. I'll find what they're hiding. While he worked, I began securing my house. I hired a security company to install cameras, discreet, motion-triggered, full audio. The technician said, "This setup's more like a small business than a home." I have family, I said. And I like to know what they're doing. He laughed, not realizing how serious I was. By the end of the day, every common area was covered. Kitchen, living room, hallway. All legal, all mine. That night, I watched the live feed from my phone. Derek paced in the kitchen, muttering. Amanda sat at the table, head in her hands. I couldn't hear every word, but fragments carried through. If he knows it's too late now. We need the money. My stomach tightened. Proof. Not enough for the police yet, but proof. 10 days later, Brian called. Frank, you might want to sit down. I'm sitting. They're in deep. Derek owes close to $100,000 in business loans, another $50,000 in credit cards, and $40,000 with private lenders. Interest rates that'd make the mob blush. Amanda's got $30,000 in debt herself. They're drowning. So that's why they needed me gone. Exactly. You're the payday. Send me everything, I said. That night, I spread the documents across my desk. Numbers. Statements. Missed payments. I didn't see finances. I saw motives. The next morning, Amanda knocked on my door. Dad? Do you need breakfast? I'm fine. You've been quiet lately. I'm just tired. She hesitated. Okay, well, let me know if you need anything. Her voice was cautious, careful, like someone stepping across a frozen lake. As soon as she left, I opened a new document folder on my laptop labeled Evidence. Inside I saved hospital toxicology reports, financial documents from Brian, screenshots from the camera feeds. Then I backed it up to the cloud. Redundant copies. Encrypted. This wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. A week later, I met with Margaret again. Her tone was all business. We're ready for the new will, she said. The conference room was formal, mahogany table, witnesses, a notary. Mr. Allen, she said for the record, do you understand this document disinherits your daughter completely? Yes. That's intentional. You're making this decision of your own free will? Absolutely. I signed each page slowly, deliberately. No tremor. No hesitation. In the memorandum attached to the will, I detailed everything: the poisoning, the hospital report, the financial motive. It wasn't just legal, it was a message. When it was done, I left her office with 3 copies. One for her, one for my safe deposit box, one for home. That evening, I placed the home copy just barely visible under some mail on the kitchen counter. Not hidden. Not obvious. Then I waited. At 5:42 p.m., Amanda came home from work. Through the camera feed, I watched her drop her keys, grab a glass of water, and then noticed the folder. Her hand froze midair. She looked toward the stairs, making sure I wasn't there, then picked it up. She read standing still. Her face drained of color. She called Derek. Get home. Now. 20 minutes later, his truck pulled up. He came in still in his jacket. Amanda shoved the papers at him. He flipped pages fast, then slowed when he reached the memorandum. His jaw locked. They started arguing, voices low and sharp. I couldn't hear every word, but I didn't need to. Their faces said everything. A knock came at my bedroom door a few minutes later. Derek. He tried to sound calm. Frank, can we talk? I opened the door, leaning on the frame, playing the tired old man again. Amanda found something strange, he said. A will? There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, I said. It's my new will. Legal and filed. You're making decisions that affect everyone in this family, he said, voice rising. I'm making decisions because someone in this family tried to kill me. His expression cracked. You can't prove that. I don't have to prove it right now, I said. I just have to survive long enough to make sure you never see a penny of what I built. Amanda started crying. Dad, please, we owe so much. We didn't mean. You should have thought about that before you handed me that coffee. Derek's face hardened. We'll contest it. We'll say you're not competent. We'll get doctors to testify. Try it, I said. I have documentation you don't know about. Surveillance you can't erase. And more patience than either of you. He opened his mouth to speak, but Amanda grabbed his arm. Let's go, she whispered. They left. I closed the door and turned back to my computer. Downloaded the footage. Archived the audio. Dated timestamp backed up. The first strike was complete. They tried to poison me out of desperation. Now I was going to destroy them out of clarity. They say once you set a plan in motion, you can't predict every ripple. That's true. But you can stack the deck in your favor until the odds are no longer chance and coincidence, but calculation and consequence. When I signed the new will, that was the pivot. Everything after that felt like a series of deliberate moves on a board I knew how to play. The law moves slower than anger, but it's less messy. It's cleaner. It leaves records. Margaret Davis, sharp suit, sharper mind, told me the legal steps in a voice that treated emotion as a distraction. We file an eviction, she said. We document every interaction. We preserve the recordings. We package this for the district attorney. She tasted the words as if they were small, efficient tools. I liked the sound of that. Brian finished the financial report and sent it to my inbox with a short note. They're insolvent. The house is the only real collateral. The numbers were worse than I'd imagined. Unpaid loans, default notices, payday lenders with terms that could bankrupt a person twice over. Motive. You could have an entire crime novel made up of numbers if you wanted to. Margaret filed the demand for rent and possession. Market rate, she recommended, and she put a number on paper large enough to sting them. $3,200 a month, payable within 10 days or face eviction. It's a strange thing to demand money from a child you love, but this wasn't about rent. It was about boundaries, consequence, and the law, a public mechanism that would force them to act or reveal themselves. They chose to reveal. It was no surprise when Derek called first, voice taut, trying to sound in control. We can work this out, he said. There was always that tone in his voice, salesman meets villain. He offered the standard things, promises, excuses, plans that never had to be implemented because they were always about tomorrow. I let him speak and then said quietly, "There's a court order. Take it up with your counsel." The line went quiet on his end for a long time. Then he hung up. Amanda came to the door that afternoon, hands empty, eyes broken. She knelt, palms on the hem of my shirt like a child. "Dad, please. We'll find a place. We'll. Her voice collapsed into the same sound she'd been practicing for months. Distress, pleading, the kind of performance people give when the script has been rehearsed. You tried to kill me, I said. It wasn't loud. I didn't need it to be. It landed like a stone in still water. She flinched like someone struck. Her shoulders crumpled in a way that felt, for an instant, human and not an actor's well-timed slump. Then she started to talk about bills, the babyish "we were desperate," the old script. I listened. Margaret had told me to record everything, one-party consent, legal in our state. I did. The eviction process moved as Margaret predicted. A paper trail, hearings that took 15 minutes of courtroom time, and a judge who read the record and signed an order giving them 30 days to either pay market rent or vacate. They had no realistic ability to pay. The creditors Brian named had already begun calling. The letters I sent, envelopes with copies of the new will, the demand for rent, and some of the more damning financial summaries, had the intended effect. They pulled at creditors' appetites the way vultures gather at any scent of weakness. I watched them unravel through the cameras I had in my home and the reports Brian fed me. Derek stopped showing up to meetings. Amanda was frantic, then defensive, then whispering into the phone and then yelling. Everything you'd expect from people who know the ground is sliding out from beneath them. They began to point fingers at each other when the pressure became too great. It was a small mercy that the needle finally moved in the direction I wanted. From "he tried to frame us" to "we did something desperate." There is a peculiar pleasure in letting the system work when you've built a package that the system can't ignore. Margaret filed copies of my hospital records, the toxicology report, Dr. Mitchell's assessment, the surveillance clips, and Brian's financial report to the district attorney's office with a short, clear cover letter. Possible attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and elder abuse, it said. The phrasing was clinical enough to avoid melodrama and blunt enough to demand attention. A DA's office moves with a different kind of caution than a man bent on payback. Jennifer Morrison, I'd heard her name before, took the case. She is the kind of prosecutor who reads things the way Margaret reads statutes, deliberately with a slow, efficient appetite. Her first question to Brian when he met her was about legality, the recordings, the methods, chain of custody. Everything had to be squeaky clean. We spent time organizing the evidence like we were building a machine, each part necessary, none redundant. Is there anything else? She asked me at the first meeting. She tilted her head not from curiosity but from method. Anything you've held back? I told her the truth. I was recording in my pocket. I have a confession. Not framed. Not elicited. Admitting involvement, spoken while not fully aware of what would happen after. She smiled, not the kind of smile that warms but the kind that measures. That's our bread and butter, she said. It's very helpful. Then she looked at me. You understand these women are your daughter and daughter-in-law. Yes, I said. I understand. They tried to kill me. No small talk. No greeting card softening. Her pen scratched onto her pad. Detectives came. They interviewed me. They watched footage. The comfortable things you tell yourself, that a child would never do such a thing, fell away under their questions. They did not try to soften the edges. They asked for dates, times, statements, everything sticky and mundane that proves motive and opportunity. My answers did not vary because I did not modify them. Truth is stubborn like that. There was a point in the middle of the investigation where Derek tried something I had expected. He sought a hospital consultation to have me evaluated. He spoke to an admittedly willing clinician who, for a fee, would provide an assessment suggesting I had cognitive impairment. He thought that would be the wedge to gut my will and muddy the waters. He'd paid the wrong man. The clinician they chose had been the subject of complaints about his ethics for years, A man who would have made a neat soundbite on the stand but who also left a paper trail ripe for cross-examination. Brian found recordings of their meeting. Brennan, that was the clinician's name, made the mistake of describing methods that would look like braggadocio on tape. We had him. We met him in a coffee shop under the sort of mundane light where caricatures are made. He was greasy and practiced. Derek was nervous. Brian's recording device captured everything. There's a strange calm when you're watching the person who tried to buy justice for you confess how they plan to buy it. Brennan described in dry, precise terms how he would document cognitive decline, how to phrase things in evaluation so courts would find them compelling. That conversation would later be one of the most damning pieces of evidence. When the warrants were signed, Detective Maria Hernandez and her team moved early in the morning. Their timing was tactical. Strike before breakfast, before flight, before long conversations could unspool half-truths. I sat on my porch with coffee I'd made myself, the smell comforting and untainted. It was strange little rituals like that. The house moving around you, life continuing while law enforcement did the hard, loud work. They took Amanda and Derek into custody without drama. The initial shock wore off from me like a cold snap. There wasn't revelry, only the quiet awareness that the system had taken over. Arrests do not satisfy every wound, but this was a particular kind of relief. Relief because the evidence would have to be confronted publicly. Relief because the narrative could no longer be retold by rumor and gut feelings. The record would stand. The bail hearings were predictably quiet and cruel. The defense tried every angle: community ties, character witnesses, arrangements for maintenance of their basic needs. The judge looked at the evidence binder and then at the faces across the table and made a practical ruling: high bail, given the nature of the charges and the flight risk. They couldn't make it. They stayed in custody. From the outside it looks like closure. It strips you, piece by piece, into testimony and documents and memory. You sit and you recall. For someone who is a man who keeps his patients like tools in a box, the trial felt like a day-by-day sifting of everything you had set in place. Jennifer Morrison ran the prosecution like an orchestra conductor. She called witnesses in an order that made the story impossible to deny: the toxicologist who spoke in numbers and probabilities about blood levels and death risk, the ear doctor who spoke about minutes and chance, Brian who walked a jury through mountains of financial reporting, the technician who explained how the home cameras were set up and why they were legal, and finally the recordings, the brittle-sounding confessions, the business-like talk with Brennan about constructing a false narrative. They played Amanda's recorded admissions in court. Her voice, recorded in the privacy of what she thought was a desperate moment with a friend, said things that rewired motive into fact. "He's going to be gone soon anyway," she told someone. "We'll be saved. I don't want to, but we have to." Those were not absolutions, and in the cold light of a courtroom they sounded like selections from a planning session. They were devastating. The defense tried to humanize her and Derek. Their attorneys pointed at desperation, at manipulation, at the crushing weight of debt. They tried to paint Derek as the villain who'd led a weak woman astray. The recordings complicated that narrative. There were moments where Amanda wept openly on the stand, other moments where her testimony contradicted recordings and surveillance. Derek sat at the defense table, jaw tight, trying to look resolute. There wasn't much theater left. The facts had gravity in a way that made grand speeches about familial difficulty sound like desperate apologies. Cross-examination is a surgical instrument used by good lawyers. Margaret had prepared me for the pace and the method. Jennifer had trained me on facts and memory. The trick when you're testifying about betrayal is not to be cruel, and not to be theatrical. You are there to place anchor points for a jury. I saw this, I heard that, here is the evidence. You leave the emotion aside until the end, when you let a small, precise statement stand on its own. They asked me about the morning of the poisoning, and I told them in thin, small sentences. I said how the cup tasted, how the clock had been watched, how I had crawled and dialed and blacked out. I said what the doctors told me. I said the words "my daughter," and they landed with a weight that made whatever gasps there were of sympathy fall away into silence. When Amanda took the stand, there was a terrible, almost cinematic moment where the image of the little girl who once poured me orange juice on a summer morning was propped like a photograph in the air for everyone to see. She said she loved me and that what happened was a mistake. In one breath she asked for forgiveness, and in the next she hedged it with claim and excuse. It was raw and messy. The jury saw it. The jury also saw the recorded admission. Derek tried to put up defenses about circumstantial evidence, pointing to the lack of a smoking gun, no poison container, no direct film of a hand putting pills in the cup. The prosecution's answer was a direct one. Motive, opportunity, recorded admissions, financial benefit. They make their case with the kind of quiet, unflashy persistence that wins in courtrooms. Facts are patient. They wait for you to explain them, and when they're explained well, they become undeniable. I do not pretend the guilt phase of the trial was easy. A trial peels open old wounds. It returns you to the moment of fear and loss, and it makes you relive it in long sessions of testimony. But when the jury returned a guilty verdict on both counts for both defendants, attempted murder and conspiracy, I felt something like a long practical relief. Not triumph. Not celebration. Just relief that the record had been set. The system had acknowledged a truth I had tried to prove. Sentencing is where the weight of consequence is measured. The prosecutor argued the case with quiet fierceness. The defense held out the possibility of a lesser outcome, of rehabilitation. Judges are not monsters. They are human beings who read a file and try to calibrate a penalty toward some measure of proportionality. The sentences that came down were substantial. 12 years for Amanda, a higher term for Derek, long enough to change the course of both their lives and to ensure that the damage would be more than a paragraph in a ledger. On the day of sentencing, Amanda mouthed words I read as apology, but it didn't feel like a plea. She seemed small, and her face was older than her years. Derek looked like someone who'd been stripped of the comfortable masks he used to wear. When the gavel fell, the sound was final. After the legal dust settled, it was time for the quieter things. The house needed changing. For months it had been both battlefield and sanctuary. Memories were braided through the rooms like seams. I changed the locks the afternoon I came home after court. New keys, a new sense of domestic order. It's odd how physical acts, turning a key, installing a new deadbolt, can feel like cleansing. There were practicalities too. Margaret advised me on the sale of the property versus keeping it as investments. My heart had been attached to that home like a hand to its favorite tool, but the house had become a ledger of sorrow in places. I decided to sell. Not because I wanted to be rid of memories, some memories you keep, but because the act of letting go felt like reclaiming the future on my terms. Life after trial is not a movie montage where you walk into the sunrise with a smile. It's small things. Coffee without watching the clock. The mail without dread. It's making calls about trusts and translating legal decisions into everyday logistics. It's finding a new place to live that you can live in without seeing the grooves where betrayal settled into the wood. Amanda wrote to me from the facility where she was held. Her handwriting was shaky. The letter smelled faintly of institutional soap. She told me of the routine, the boredom, the scraping together of days, the therapy. She wrote, in a way that was both childish and grown up, that she understood the harm she'd caused and that she was sorry. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I read the letter twice. There was grief in it. There was truth and remorse, though remorse does not, in itself, repair what was broken. I wrote back because withholding reply felt like letting her control the terms of our silence. My note was short. I acknowledged her remorse. I didn't promise forgiveness. I offered a path forward inside the boundaries I was capable of holding. People ask if I wanted revenge. The answer has always been complicated. Revenge is a fire that can burn you as it burns the other. What I wanted and what I planned for was accountability. A system that recognized what had happened. That is different. It is quieter. It is less about making them hurt and more about making sure the world recorded the wrongdoing and gave it a consequence that turned the ledger right side up. There were other things, quieter and kinder. I met with Sarah, director of a local veterans nonprofit, and told her I wanted to do something that mattered. Death and betrayals had a way of making the future look brittle. The idea of doing something constructive steadied me. We set up a fund to help older adults who face exploitation, particularly by family members. I wanted the money to be proactive, to fund legal advocacy, temporary housing, counseling for people who had survived offenses like mine. A bit of the estate went to the fund before the house sold. It felt right, not to buy forgiveness, but to make sure some good came of what had been a very dark chapter. A week before the move, I found, tucked in a drawer, a photograph of Amanda at 7, gap-toothed and fierce in a way that made it impossible to reduce her to a villain. I framed it and packed it in my carry box. There are things I keep not because I am nostalgic for what was, but because they remind me that people are complex. She was a child once. That child's existence does not erase what came after, and what came after does not erase that child. Human beings hold more than one shape at once. On moving day, I watched movers carry boxes past the rooms that had been the setting for so much of my life. I closed each door behind them. The new place is smaller. Easier to maintain. Cleaner in a way that matters when you want a life that is your own. I sit on the balcony sometimes and look at the street. People go by. Life is ordinary and stubborn in its insistence. I still think about the cup. Sometimes it's an intrusive thought that arrives with my coffee in the morning. The way it tasted, the image of the stain on the counter, the sudden animal panic of a man realizing his mortality. Other times the memory is dull and factual like an old scar. People who hear the story often want to know what I felt when it finally ended in court. They expect fireworks or catharsis. There wasn't a pyrotechnic sense of triumph. There was a quiet closure, a settling of accounts. The legal process gave me a public record. It gave the truth a voice that could not easily be drowned by rumor or pleading. That mattered more than I can say. A few months after the trial, I received another letter. This one was different. Amanda had written not from a place of immediate, raw apology but from a place of constructed remorse. She had enrolled in classes. She had written to a counselor. She asked simply if I could someday consider a visit. I hesitated for days, weeks. I thought of the coffee cup, of the hospital lights, of the coldness of the floor when I crawled to the phone. I also thought of the photograph. The line between forgiveness and moral permission is thin and personal. Forgiveness is often imagined as an absolution that must be offered publicly as evidence of moral superiority. That's not what I felt or wanted. I could acknowledge her remorse. That is different from absolving the act. I wrote back and told her as much. If she could show sustained reflection and accountability over time, perhaps we could consider supervised contact in the future. I did not promise visits. I promised room for the possibility of change, dependent on observable behavior and the passage of time. That is as close to forgiveness as I was ready to be. One night not long after everything settled, I sat on the porch with a new cup of coffee, the one I had made myself. Nothing dramatic happened. No angelic music played. There was only the sun setting and the ordinary sound of neighbors mowing lawns and a dog barking 2 houses over. I closed my eyes and let all the lessons I'd learned, about trust, about boundary, about the ways people unravel under pressure settle. People sometimes ask if I regret the choices I made. I don't. I regret that my daughter and son-in-law made choices that led us here. I regret the feeling of betrayal and the long period of repair that has followed. But the decisions to secure evidence, to act through legal channels, to frame my actions in terms of consequence rather than bloodlust, those were carefully considered. They gave me a way to respond that let the law do its work and kept me, in the end, honest with myself. I am not a hero. I am not a saint. I was a man who nearly died, who woke up and decided to create consequences that would protect the future and call wrongdoing by its name. The hardest part, harder than fighting in court, was the quiet work of living again in a world where trust had been broken. That took time, and it took small acts. Making coffee without fear, sleeping without imagining the world tilting, buying a new set of keys and turning them in a door that felt like mine again. If there is a lesson in this, it is not the obvious pieties about how you should always distrust those closest to you. The lesson is simpler and, I think, more humane. Know what you own in law and in heart. Be prepared to protect it. Build things with care, and when those things are threatened, act with methodical clarity. Justice, messy, slow, and imperfect, is better than silence. Some nights I wake up and think about small things. A song Amanda used to hum, a handprint on a window, and for a moment there is no villainy, only memory. Then the past returns and I remember the hard things I had to do to make right what they tried to make wrong. I write this not because I seek attention or pity. I write because truth, like evidence, should be recorded. If this reaches you, remember that the world is complicated. People you love are fallible. Systems are imperfect. But there is a way, however quiet, to bring accountability into your life without lowering yourself to the level of those who wronged you. And if you ever stand at a kitchen counter with someone offering you a cup and the clock in the room seems to have a new urgency, listen. Trust the small things. They are often the only things that will save you.